Welcome everyone for today's event. Ourselves and all of those who maybe join us throughout the talk, or even those who later on will make contact. We welcome all of those also in the spirit who have the opportunity to learn as much as I and all of us have. We are carrying on our program, Spiritual Christmas, with the main theme, Jesus' Loving Invitation. And today we have the pleasure to have with us from Santiago, California, Daniel Assisi, who already has been with us previously, face-to-face and also online. Welcome, Daniel, once more amongst all of us. And he will be talking about the theme, the Beatitudes. So before we start, I would invite everyone to join me in the harmonization process. For those who would like to close their eyes, feel free to do so. So let's start to look within. Disconnect from our external reality and from a moment observe ourselves internally, observing how we breathe, also understanding that we are all essentially beings of love and goodness. And in this moment, all of us being blessed by the enlightened beings who are with us. May we observe and feel the feelings of tenderness, of goodness, feeling involved in peace as we start giving thanks to the Creator of the universe, of everything, of everyone, for these unique and special moments in our existences. Our gratitude for our Master Jesus, our dear friend, our gratitude for the spiritual friends who are with all of us. Gratitude in these moments of festive environment on earth that we are granted with the possibility to reflect about spirituality and united through the feelings of love and brotherhood, we start our event today. So be it. So once more, welcome everyone who is here already and those who are coming, and welcome Danielle. And as we mentioned, Danielle will be talking about the theme, the Beatitudes. So from now onwards, I hand it over to you, Danielle.
Thank you so very much, Evanisi, and greetings of peace in this most joyous holiday season. And so we find ourselves in the middle of unknown circumstances once more with the latest Omicron variant of this very interesting companion, the COVID-19 coronavirus, for the past 2 years or so. We want to take an hour of your time to remain optimistic and to dive deeper into perhaps the most beautiful piece of poetry ever written, the most powerful spiritual roadmap for us, the Beatitudes, beautiful verses that we find in Jesus Christ's Sermon on the Mount. And a gigantic task to talk about this topic today, because it is so beautiful and so deep and so powerful that sometimes I just feel short of the task. So I'm going to count on your collaboration, on your patience, on your indulgence for us to be able to explore this topic together. a marvelous, marvelous topic. And it's a really powerful one in many ways. And it has been talked about many people and studied by many more in many different places and many different times. Yet it bears our attention. It really does. And today, so what we want to do then is make a claim that the Beatitudes really present us with a spiritual roadmap to enlightenment. And that's what we want to add to the conversation, because you may have heard about it, you may know this deeply. What we hope to bring is a interpretation of many different possible ones, because the words of the Christ, this incredible spirit that was with us for a short while 2000 years ago in the flesh, but that has never left us in spirit, they're so deep and so meaningful and can be understood in so many different ways that it bears to say one more time that there are different interpretations. And so what we offer today is one that we hope will help you see it at the light of the knowledge that has been added to our spiritual understanding by Spiritism. So if anything else, we hope to bring a slightly more spiritual perspective to such a beautiful, beautiful piece of poetry or ethical living or spiritual roadmap, whatever it is that you may think necessary. So let's start. Let's start by maybe bringing some context to the mix. Well, the Sermon on the Mount has been described as the most beautiful and profound ethical statement ever uttered. So much so that although it continues to exist within the Christian tradition, it has impacted people everywhere in the world, regardless of their religion, to such an extent that even the incredible Mahatma Gandhi has said that if all the books in the world were lost, but the Sermon on the Mountain remained, humanity would not have lost much. And so, where can we find it? Well, the Sermon on the Mount, it's found in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5. And in fact, it goes into chapter 5, 6, and 7. But the Beatitudes, which are part of the Sermon on the Mount, which is what we are going to attain ourselves to today, are just a couple of verses, just 8 verses or so that we find in there. So if you want to read it in its entirety, you may want to make your way to chapter 5 of Matthew and tackle the whole Sermon on the Mount. Today, again, we're going to focus on the Beatitudes, which we're going to read together in a little bit. They are very short. But before we do so, I think it's also important for us to consider the context in which they came, because the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount, are perhaps the ultimate expression and the summation of everything that this incredible spirit, the Christ, proposes that we do and that he has also done. So when we are faced with the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes in particular, we can approach it with a lens of higher perspective. What we are going to look at today is a whole philosophy of life, a whole way of what some Christians would have described as entering the kingdom of heaven, and that we, with our Spiritist lens, may call spiritually evolving towards God. And that is very important, because sometimes there is so much out there in the world. There's so many beautiful ideas and so many things that may speak to our heart that it becomes a little bit difficult for us to connect everything. And my claim today is that the spiritual roadmap that Jesus gives us in the Beatitudes gives us a very specific way of simplifying all that incredible spiritual knowledge out in the world in a way that we can understand and make it meaningful and impactful for our lives. So in a little bit, we are going to read it together and then take it apart bit by bit in a short period of time, but hopefully enough to give us a sense, a taste of how impactful this proposal can be. And I think it goes without saying that this is also very important for us within a traditional Christian context, because this is the moment that Jesus, early on in his passage with us, sets a flag, so to speak, about what is it that he is going to do and be about in his entire existence with us, and that we should follow suit as well. But it's not something new in a way. What he does do is he gathers a lot of sayings and sentences that we find present in the Old Testament, the first part of the Christian Bible, that brings to us the traditions and the wisdom of the Jewish people until Christ. But what he does is he gets those sayings and different parts of that old tradition, and he reframes them and repurposes them with a new lens. Because it is at this moment in the Beatitudes that in our human history, we see a transition from force and authority of having to follow the laws of God because we were told to a call to action that is based in love. And that is monumental. We don't think much about it today, but until then, until that moment when Christ climbs on the mount, speaks to the people around him, we're still under the idea that there will be punishment and consequences for our non-compliance. And at that moment, Jesus transforms that into a beckoning towards happiness and joy. So these words, uttered 2,000 years ago, have never been said better since then. And that's what we hope to approach it, how we hope to approach it today, but bringing with us the knowledge that we have become better at understanding when it comes to spirituality of reincarnation, mediumship, and the belief in the afterlife. So let's jump in together and see what we can do, because our time is always short. All right, so let's go in there. Let's move here to presentation only. Let's together for a quick second so that we can place it, and then it will come together to understand the different pieces. And chapter 5 of Matthew starts. And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, he being Jesus. And when he was set, his disciples came unto him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. And blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. And blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye, when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. All right. Short, but hopefully powerful. And in these lines that touch our soul, that is so much wisdom that it might make sense for us to break them down ever so slightly. And today we posit that they're important by themselves, but they're also important in the order in which they present ourselves so that we can understand. So we hope to take that lens to kind of offer that to ourselves today. So let's start by taking each one of these Beatitudes, and by the way, that word comes from the Beati, which was the original Latin piece from all these things. So these blessings, these moments of joy, this happiness. And so the first Beatitude then, as we can rightly surmise, is blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is a kingdom of heaven. And in a way that is typically Jesus-like, these teachings sometimes can be counterintuitive to our physical perspective. But that's exactly why he says them, because he has come to bring our attention to the fact that life is eternal and that the physical life in which we live is but a mere second in our overall spiritual being. And so everything that the Spirit of Christ speaks to us about addresses our life, yes, here in the material realm, but it also beckons us to consider our spiritual nature. So we must understand these words in that manner too. So when he says, blessed are the poor in spirit, he is making what could appear to be a counterintuitive argument for us. Because the world has been telling us that we should amass as much wealth as possible, that success is oftentimes equated with how much we have, how powerful we are, or what status we may obtain in this lifetime. But here, he's saying that this attachment to material things, to this perspective, won't lead us far. Because he will often say that in many different places throughout here on earth, you can see in the New Testament, bear his words, that there is very little benefit for us to gain the world and lose our souls. That is to say, to focus in obtaining success in the physical life, only to compromise ourselves in spiritual terms. So when he says, blessed are the poor in spirit, he's not making a judgment on wealth in the material world. He's not telling us that only the poor of resources in the physical world will in fact go to heaven. Because we know very well that there are people who are poor and are not necessarily kind or good in character, just as we know that there are people who are rich who are also not kind and wealthy in character either yet. So it's not the amount of resources that one possesses in the physical realm that dictates the quality of our character or our spiritual elevation. Instead, he makes a shift to talking about being poor by spirit. And what is it to be poor in spirit? Is to no longer attach ourselves to the need for physical things. That is an incredibly difficult thing to do, but a fundamental shift nevertheless. Because this first suggestion, this first tenet, tells us that it is in losing the attachment to physical things that we gain the kingdom of heaven. That we have to make a choice between building our own selfish kingdoms here on this plane while we are incarnate, versus focusing on the qualities of the spirit that matter so that we can build the kingdom of heaven, spiritually speaking. And that is a very big consideration for our times when we continue to hear that to be successful and to be happy means to acquire things, houses, cars, titles, partners. But we have been proven by experience that those things are like the water from the ocean that we drink and yet leaves us thirsty. So in this first moment, Jesus tells us that our roadmap to spiritual enlightenment starts with proper positioning of our minds in relation to our role in the physical world. That is not about gaining resources here. It is about detaching ourselves from the needs that we feel to only pay attention to that which surrounds us in the physical realm. He's not saying, don't take care of your life, clothe and nourish yourself properly. That's not what he's saying. He's not telling us to climb up a mountain and stop interacting with anybody in the physical world like a hermit. That is not what he's saying. He's saying is that if we are poor by spirit, if we are in want, if we are in need, I should say, if we desire few things on the spiritual realm, of the physical realm, then we have taken a fundamental step towards inheriting the kingdom of heaven. And we spend a little bit of time here because it's important for us to consider that Jesus is speaking to our immortal souls. He is reminding us that we are immortal spirits before we are incarnate ones. Something which we already know and are constantly reminded through Spiritism by our communications with the spiritual realm. They tell us that the spirits on the other side of reincarnations they have had, the reincarnations we have had. And that's important for us to break this mindset. So at the beginning of Jesus' incredible teachings is a reminder that we are immortal beings and as such must place greater emphasis in the spiritual world than in the physical one. And we could stay here for a while, as you can tell. We can argue and make different considerations and elicit your contributions in many different ways. But let's move on to the second beatitude. And that's also a very interesting one, in which he says, "Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted." Again, Jesus seems to propose something that we, when we use our physical eyes, seem to be counterintuitive. It does not make sense. Why would we want to be in pain? If we are reading this only with our physical understanding of things, almost seems like Jesus is telling us that we should be in pain, that we should be in emotional distress, and only then we will get pity and affection. But that's not how we interpret this today. Taking again our spiritual perspective, we remember that those who mourn, they are mourning the loss of something they care about, something they had a relationship to. And so I think that as Jesus is bringing to us a spiritual perspective to this roadmap to happiness, he's inviting us to consider that the moment we begin to be poor in spirit, it is only natural that we will mourn the things we liked and had before. As we begin to detach ourselves from the material things and the desires that we had, we will feel this pain. We will feel this hurt, this longing in our hearts for those things that we used to attach ourselves to, we used to think that will bring us happiness. And it's important for us to acknowledge that feeling, because that is how we also will get comforted. When we acknowledge that those things, those habits, those desires that we had before are no longer present in us, and that we want to move forward and understand that their relationship with us has met its course, that we are on our way to becoming new and different people, we will find the comfort of the spiritual realm. So it is normal that we then undergo this moment of strife and challenge in which we feel that it's hard and I wish I had these things. But the good news is that we already acknowledge that they are not the ones that are going to bring us happiness. And so when we mourn spiritually. We mourn for the pains and habits that we are leaving behind, that we haven't completely disassociated ourselves from. We still want those things. We still want that status. We still want that wealth in the physical world, but we know now that that's not the way to go for us, that they are just temporary mirages in the desert of life, that they will only bring temporary satisfaction. And because we know that they are not what we should really tie our happiness to, we are prepared to let them go. But the moment of letting go, the process of letting those old habits, our old selves go, is one that brings with it a little bit of pain. But the good news is that we have and will be comforted as we move through it. And so, as we begin to connect these two Beatitudes together, these first initial ones, let's make our way to the third one as well. And the third one is, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And one more time, Jesus brings to us a concept that seems to be against everything that our ego tells us about the physical world. Our ego tells us, go ahead and grab everything that you can for yourself right now. Display your strength. Step over other people. Show them how strong you are. Never give up. Just simply power through all situations, no matter the damage that you are making to other people, because you only live once. There's even an expression that has come out in this past years, YOLO, you only live once. But we're not so sure of that if we followed the teachings of the Christ, because what he's saying here is that the meek, the more timid, the more humble, will inherit the earth. That is, that the way to inherit, to obtain your riches, to really enjoy all that we have, is not by aggressively pursuing it in a way that it may harm others. It's by being kind to each other, because it is the kind that will come back to this planet and will be put in its stewardship. It is the nice and kind that are considered for others that will continue to evolve in this globe of ours, that will continue to set the standard for what's ahead. And so, if in the first beatitude he reminds us that we should detach ourselves from the physical, and in the second he calls our attention that this process will be painful, on the third he tells us how to do it, that we should not fight violently for things, but instead flow through the universe with kindness, trusting in all its glory, and being kind and humble and understanding our spiritual nature and our spiritual essence, and know why we are here. And when we do, we will be the true guardians and keepers and inheritors of the earth. So it is by taking a different posture, not one that is grabbing for every power, for everything that we can, that we actually get that which we want, which is happiness and fulfillment. This beatitude is a request for us to change the approach that we think we ought to have towards the physical world. It's not about conquering, taking, and pillaging. It is about helping, building, and assisting. It's a fundamental departure from the values that the physical world wants to impose on us. But of course, this incredible teacher doesn't stop there. He goes on and gives us yet another great teaching when he says, blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Again, if we read this with our physical minds, we think only on the injustice of the world. We think that those who are hungry and thirst after righteousness, maybe they have been wronged. Maybe they have been hurt. And in many different ways, all of us feel that way about life sometimes. We feel like maybe we have been dealt a hand of cards that is not our best, that maybe life could be unfair, and that things are unjust. And if we use only our physical eyes and try to understand the universe by this snapshot, by this one picture that we call our incarnation, we may feel that way. But once we begin to understand our spiritual journey through the eons of time, through the many centuries and millennia, when we understand ourselves to be spirits in constant spiritual evolution, reincarnating as many times as it is necessary, then our hunger and thirst after righteousness is not a complaint about the injustice of this world, but instead is a desire to become better. We will go through life knowing that these incarnations, we might be dealt hardships and difficult handicaps to deal with. But we know that these are consequences of actions that we have done in the past, and that by atoning them or dealing with them right now, by facing our trials and our challenges in the best and most resolute manner we can, we are obtaining this righteousness, this justice that we so desperately seek. We know that we are, so to speak, paying down our spiritual credit card debt towards a zero balance. And that's the only way for us to acquire riches, spiritually speaking, is to first also pay down and give back to the universe all the damage that we may have done to ourselves and others. So blessed indeed are those who are hungering for that moment of justice by going through our lifetimes in a way that honors the immortal journey that we are in which we begin to better ourselves and understand that the difficulties of this lifetime are indeed temporary, and that the problems that we face were given to us because we have the ability to fulfill them. And in doing so, we are becoming better because we are dealing with the consequences of our past actions. We are so desirous and hungering for righteousness, for justice, that we know that we have to go through these acts. And that happens after we begin to change our lives and become meeker, become more humble. But that is not enough, because our journey continues. And in the next beatitude, our Lord, the greatest teacher that has ever lived, tells us about the power of mercy. When he says, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." And here is an interesting perspective that takes place as well psychologically. And what is that? That if in the beginning of his Beatitudes, we were really being told or directed or suggested or invited to reconsider the way we saw the physical world and how we should behave, now we look not only inside as we should, but we begin to understand that there are others around us, because mercy has to do not only that which we want for ourselves, but doing things for others. That also means forgiving others, extending love to others when perhaps they might not even warrant it. And Shakespeare, in a beautiful way, says, in perhaps one of his greatest strokes of the pen, says, "The mercy is blessed because it gives twice. It gives to those who receive the mercy, but also to those who give mercy." So mercy is a blessing for everybody involved, for those who are the target of mercy and those who are giving it, because they know that they could not act in a kind manner, yet they choose to, and that action benefits others. So it is by being merciful to others, by applying love to others, that we ourselves receive that mercy, because we know now the cause and consequence of our many lifetimes through our study of reincarnation and Spiritism. So indeed, blessed are those of us who are beginning or will begin to understand how beautiful and how beneficial to us all, and individually as well, it is to love in a way that we can be merciful to each other. But what else? What else is there in our short time that we could cover and talk about? Because once we become more merciful, once we begin to understand the importance of acting upon the world, we become pure in heart. And perhaps that is why Jesus claims that blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. counterintuitive one more time, because to be pure in heart is to have the right intentions, to carry no residue in our heart, no hunger for pain of others, no revenge and nothing else, but to be pure in heart, this quality that we all want so desperately, to be able to sleep calmly at night and to have the right focus and the right desire. And you think, well, if I get to that point, then it will be incredible. And indeed, it will be blessed. But I won't, if I get to that point, it's almost a point of emotional perfection. And that's when we get to see God. It's when we think that we have done it all that we begin to align to this true understanding of what God is, that we begin to realize how powerful God can be. So, blessed are the pure in the heart. And this is a moment that we are going to get to when we have already let go of our physical attachments, when we have attempted to change our behaviors, and we have been practicing in such a way in which we can be merciful and meek. And by doing that, we will attain this pure heart where we no longer want the things we have, we only want what is better for us. And that is incredible for us in many different ways. And so as we go forward, we're also going to see a change here. And again, he calls us to, now that we have the best of intentions, now that our hearts are aligned and we have understood the power of acting upon the world, he calls us to take a step further. He says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. He's calling us to take on this mantle of being those who make peace in the world, who apply our mercifulness and our pure heart and our change of self to not only ourselves, but to those around us, to help our brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and cousins and aunts to be at peace with themselves as well. And so here we have this beautiful fundamental change that invites us to take a part, to play a role in the universe, to be co-creators of joy, because that is the roadmap that we go into, that we have a role to play as well. And then we can ask, but what's next? Well, next, he also gives us a peep. He nets us a glimpse of what's going to happen to us in this path that he sets forth for us. And he says, and when you get to that point, be not surprised when you are persecuted for righteousness' sakes, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. When you get to a point where you are doing good for the world's benefit and not just yours, that people will rise up against what you say and will persecute you for no reason at all, other than they don't want the world to change. And when we get to that point, we are blessed because we are acting out of our own volition, because we know what is right and that's what we want to do. And we are no longer worried about what other people will think of us and whether they will like us or not because we are doing this or that. That we have stepped into our spiritual truth as immortal spirits and understand that the judgments of the physical world are not as important as the judgment of our own inner consciousness and spirit. And what a blessing it is. What a blessing it will be to be able to do the right thing because we know it is right, without worrying whether people are going to understand what we are doing, because the pleasure of doing the right thing will be enough for us. Maybe there are moments in our lives when you do the right thing for the right thing's sake, and you feel good about it. Maybe all of us have done one or two or three things or more that leads us there. But what would it be like to do that constantly? Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be incredible? So, our time is short, and Jesus' teachings are so powerful and so profound. So let's quickly review, just really quickly here, what are these Beatitudes that he speaks about, and how is it that we can understand what they would look like for us. So let's do this really quickly here. Okay. All right. So imagine for a second that we did connect all of them. And by connecting all of these Beatitudes in our spiritual roadmap, we begin to see how there is a path for us here. And the path is perhaps simpler than we imagine. The first one is that we must become poor in spirit, that we must understand that the physical goods, the things in this world, are not in our possession. They are not ours to begin with. They are just temporarily in our stewardship. Once we begin to understand that and comprehend that we are immortal spirits temporarily passing through, and we give the things of the world their due perspective, we will no longer be attached to them and become to free ourselves from our desires and the wants that keeps us enslaved to our own suffering. And when we are mastering that, we are reminded too that this process of detachment for that which is physical and accepting the spiritual as the prevalent reality of our lives, now and beyond, it's only natural that we mourn that we are leaving behind what we had a relationship with. And these things, even though we know they are no longer healthy for us, will still pull us back. They will still make us sad. They will still make us long for them, but that is okay, because that is how we heal. That is how we move forward as we make terms with the reality that those things are now gone, that we are choosing to leave them behind. And blessed will we also be if by doing that, we understand that we must be meek and not aggressive with our posture in the physical world, that we ought to take a completely different approach to self-fulfillment by not grabbing everything we can and shoving in our faces on it and drinking it all and eating it all and doing it all, but instead understanding that fulfillment comes from the spirit and not the physical body. That changes our perspectives and it requires us to be less aggressive and more meek. And as we do that, we will begin to understand one more time that we are souls traveling through the universe, incarnating in different bodies at different places in different times, as many times as necessary, so that we can learn the lessons that we need to learn to become better beings. And as we do that, we are no longer fazed by the injustices of the physical world, but understand that we hunger and thirst for a justice of the spiritual realm, where we are beginning to even, so to speak, balance out the unhappy consequences of our actions. And so we accept the trials of the world, sometimes that seem so unjust, as necessary steps towards our spiritual evolution. We understand that what we really hunger for is the moment where we are at peace with our consciousness and we feel at ease with the universe. So we are hungry for spiritual justice for ourselves. We are hungry and thirsty for the moment when we can overcome our shortcomings and the damage we have done to ourselves and others and feel fair, just, and balanced in the universe. And when we do that, we will no longer want to apply our own achievements to our debts, but we will begin to use our talents to be kind and loving to others as we continue this climb or this dive into enlightenment. We will take a more merciful position when we understand that we could be judges, but we choose not to. We choose instead to forgive and to help others. Because it is truly that when we give, that we receive. It is in when we give that we grow. It is when we give that we get peace of spirit. And that our role in the universe begins to change and is no longer just about us. It is about everyone else as well. And that when we fully are able to realize we become pure in heart, when we see and wish for the right things, not just for ourselves, but for everybody. And that will come from practice of being merciful. That comes from knowing there's justice in the world when we behave humbly, because we are no longer mourning the relationship we did with the things that attached us to a past that wasn't happy for us. And then we begin to act not only for those around us, but in the entire world. We begin to be peacemakers. We begin to bring joy, peace, and understanding to others. And we embrace that role because we know that our role in the universe is to grow ourselves and help others grow, as well as we find in question 132 of the Spirit's book. We take on this mantle of co-creators of the universe, a beautiful moment. And when we do, we begin to understand as well that it will be not a surprise if others who perhaps are not yet aligned with this way of thinking decide to persecute us and accuse us unjustly of different things, because they do not want to change. But that does not matter for us, because we are now finding the pleasure of doing the right thing, regardless of what other people may think of us, regardless of what other people may want us to do. Their opinions don't matter to us as much as the quietness and joy of our own harmonious conscience. And what a beautiful moment it is. And if you think about it, these beautiful teachings of the Christ are not just words that he spoke on a mount 2,000 years ago. They are also exactly the actions that he took in this world when he came by example to show us that what he had in terms of wealth or social position mattered not. And perhaps that's why he was born in the poor area of Bethlehem to a carpenter, a position not well structured within social terms. And he himself had no physical wealth and cared not even to carry with him a purse of money. That mattered not to him. He was detached from these necessities. He was already a poor in spirit. And he came to teach us about the pain that it would be for us to leave this ways before. In fact, it is so hard for us to accept that oftentimes we focus on his story through our physical eyes as if it were a story of pain, of suffering, of mourning. But for him, it was never a story of mourning and pain, because he came to be with us out of love. We are so stuck in our ways that we think that his story was one of pain and challenges, but he was already meek. Remember, he tells us, take on my yoke because I am meek and humble. He already had this different approach to life, where he knew that just fighting for power and attention in the physical realm was not that important. To have a position, a role, a title in this physical world is secondary to that of having joy and peace of mind in the kingdom of heaven, that is to say, the spiritual world. Because he already had in him this hunger for justice satiated, because he understood the divine laws and what it takes to be enlightened and happy. He was already merciful, and in fact, his passage on earth was one big act of mercy, where he gave to us gifts he did not need to give, but chose to for our own benefit, because in his heart, he was already pure. He wanted the right things. He wanted to be with God. He already was with God. He already saw God like God saw. He already acted as God would have acted, because he was in perfect alignment. My Father and I are one. And he was the ultimate peacemaker that came to make peace, even if it seemed to us, who are still clinging to the physical world, who are still struggling to be poor in spirit, who is still at level 1, that he was causing up a commotion, that he was revolting, that he was shaking up the spiritual establishment, the political establishment of the time. But he was not. He was bringing us peace. And it was understood that therefore he will be persecuted even when he was completely unjust. And part of his life is that as well. That of the story of how we persecuted him, but he stood fast to what he believed out of mercy and love and pureness of heart to be a peacemaker, because he knew what was right and he knew what was best for us. And so as we approach Christmas, what we bring to ourselves is a question that perhaps we may want to address in one way or another in this moment of our lives, which is, what will we do from here? What is it that we are going to choose? What are we going to take forward and meditate about in this Christmas of ours? Because this invitation that Christ has brought us 2,000 years ago, in the manner of speaking, when he climbed that mount and spoke to us of things that are hard for us to understand still, because we are so stuck in believing that there is only the physical world, that only that which meets the eyes. So as we get closer to this Christmas that is upon us in just one more day for Christmas Eve, may we reflect on this beautiful roadmap and pathway that Jesus, our older brother, the unloved lover, he who gave us his physical life and, more important, his spiritual self, that we can understand our nature. May we reflect on looking at his teachings not by what other people have told us, but by our own investigation, so that we too can fulfill the ultimate reality, which is to understand that we are just temporarily in the physical realm, but that who we are and what we are is spiritual, and that everybody around us is also a spiritual being in evolution. And so as Christmas approaches, we extend the invitation to go back to the beautiful Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus revolutionizes the history of humanity by exposing us to a thinking that is based on love and that beckons us to consider spirituality and our spiritual reality as the ultimate reality of being, and to invite us to shift from that perspective through our daily actions, much the same way he did while he was here with us. Of course, we are grateful for his presence, for his inspiration, and for his teachings that are perhaps made anew or more easily understandable to us through the knowledge we harness and collect through Spiritism, that lets us see things under a different light. But nevertheless, we are grateful for all those who have come before us. We are grateful for you listening to us today, and we wish you a very happy and Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much indeed, Daniel. It was beautiful to follow your roadmap within spirituality, reflecting about Jesus' references and invitation. Thank you very much indeed. As we are approaching the end of our meeting here tonight, we would kindly invite you to do our final prayer. Would it be possible? And invite everyone who is with us to follow you.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. And if I am also allowed, I would love to ask folks to keep in touch if they would like to. They can find me on social media, Dan Assisi. That would be wonderful. But more importantly, let's go ahead also and elevate our minds in this moment and our hearts together. And if we feel comfortable closing our eyes, we do that. But more importantly, let's look inwards and upwards at the same time and thank our older brother who has come to be with us on earth 2,000 years ago to whisper into our souls these incredible words that have been somewhat imprinted in our hearts, indelible, that we cannot erase from our consciousness, inviting us to remind ourselves that we are more than we think, that we are more than meets the eye, that we are more than our current circumstance and our current challenges, that we are children of God, loved by the Creator, who has given us the ultimate gift of being, not only in the physical realm, but spiritually as well. Can there be greater gift than just to be? So we thank our brother Jesus, who has shown us the way, not just talked about us, to realizing our true spiritual potential by inviting us to change through our own perceptions and learning at our own pace. What love is this that reaches to us through time and invites us to become better and has patience with us and reminds us of the benefits of kindness and of love and beckons us to be ultimately happy? Thank you, God, for loving us so much as to give us the ability, the timing, and the help to get there. And all of that is so visible through the teachings and examples of Jesus, who speaks to us, especially during Christmas time. May our minds be enlightened by the knowledge that we continue to amass. May our hearts be comforted by the presence of kindness and love in the world and the help of our spiritual benefactors who are always with us, even when unseen and unbeckoned. And may we have the strength to act upon ourselves, to begin to leave behind the emphasis we place in the physical world, instead focus more on the things of the spirit. And Christmas upon us, the time of rebirth and celebration, let us celebrate the joy that it is to be alive, even in moments of great challenge, and to be that joy that we want to see in the world, to be that change we wish to see in the universe. Let's help each other. Let's be kind to each other. Let's be kind to ourselves. And let's believe that our spiritual selves and the creator of all things that has put us here for a reason has a great plan for us. So grateful for your presence, wherever you are in the world today. Grateful to the Spiritist Psychological Society, who makes the space here today, and grateful for the chance to be together, even if virtually. We wish everyone Merry Christmas, and we ask for the continued support and love of God and our older brother, Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Daniel, once more. Also inviting all of those who are with us to join us tomorrow night at 6 p.m. London time for our talk with our friend from Florida. Let me present it here. Andrea Machaneto. She will be talking about the theme Jesus, the Sublime Educator. Otherwise, all of those who want to join us tonight in the talk in Portuguese at 8 p.m. London time, we will be joined with Marcel Mariano from Brazil, who will be talking about as bem-aventuranças. Otherwise, again, much peace to you, Danielle, to your family, to all of you, all of those dear ones, and all of those who are with us. May we all carry on confident and believing in the days ahead that we are all evolving, progressing towards the greatest light, the greatest friend that we all have, which is Jesus Christ, and the enlightened spirits are with us. Hope to see you once more soon, Danielle. All the best, and saying bye-bye from London. Take care.
Bye, and Merry Christmas.